you very, very much. Lula, 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 Lula. Before he starts, I want to show you what we're giving him. We're giving him a UAW membership, an honorary membership. And I know that Jimmy Settles and Rory Gamble and Bernie Rickey are really proud that we're giving it to him. He's from Local 600, the Rouge Complex. We're also giving him, because we're so proud of his connection with the UAW, we're giving him a UAW jacket with Lula on it.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank our brother Bob King for having invited me to participate in this gathering, in this UAW gathering. First of all, I would say that due to the importance that I pay to the labor movement, to the international labor movement. Secondly, it's important because all the warmth and how the gratitude and debts that I have with the labor leaders and the metal workers and auto workers of the United States of America, that during the 80s, when I was being trialed under the national security laws for a strike that we had pushed forward, UAW sent Brother John Christensen on behalf of the UAW to go to Brazil and to render solidarity to us in Brazil. And in that moment, it was extremely important so that the military that were ruling the country and all the conservatives in Brazil would perceive that we were not alone in those days, that we were not isolated. And something very important happened in 1980 when that happened, that there was a convention, a Congress that was going on and in Moscow, the Congress of the World Labor Federation. And I couldn't manage to attend that World Labor Federation. I instead went to Detroit to talk with the labor leaders of UAW to show them what was going on in Brazil in those days under the military dictatorship. So that was, I was called anti-communist because I didn't go to Moscow, but I went to Detroit. Sincerely, I don't regret that decision they made and did not attend the other meeting in Moscow because I received a lot of solidarity from Detroit, not from Moscow. I also would like to greet our brothers and sisters from Brazil that are here, the Brazilian delegation, and also our brother Mauro Vieira, Brazilian ambassador to the U.S., and Mr. Castro, General Consulate in New York City, our brother Wagner Freitas, National President of the CUT, the National Labor Federation, João Caires, who is the International Affairs Director of the National Metal Workers Confederation of Brazil, and Rafael, our brother, who works for Ford and is the president of the Metal Workers Local Trade Union, where I started my political life and union life. I also would like to greet Paulo Nogueira Batista Jr., who is the Brazilian Executive Director for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. I fought against the IMF for so many years. I then appointed a new director as the Executive Director for the IMF. And so we're not so opponents of the IMF as we were in the past, and maybe we're a little bit allies to the IMF today, because Brazil doesn't owe money anymore to the International Monetary Fund. It's the International Monetary Fund that owes money to Brazil now. Very well. I also would like to say that some things that happened in the U.S. has motivated part of the struggle that I have taken in Brazil, served as a motivation for me. In 1990, I decided to travel around Brazil, a caravan, and I traveled 90,000 kilometers by boat, by train, by bus, by car, because I wanted to get to know the countryside and to get to know all the country and to help that country to develop, and especially to help to develop the poorest parts of Brazil. And I was very much inspired by a book that I had read that showed in that book President Roosevelt's policy to develop the Tennessee Valley Project and to make that poor region of the U.S., the Tennessee Valley, would have development, could reach development, and that they could have public works, infrastructure, bridges, highways. The objective was to develop and create jobs in the poor region of Tennessee Valley in the States. And this allowed me to get to know better my own country and to help the poorest part of Brazil to develop itself. And also, I was reading another book, President Roosevelt book, to learn a little bit how the New Deal worked. And that's when I learned some lessons in my life of how to confront the 2008 crisis. And my economists in Brazil, every time that we discussed crisis, they remembered President Roosevelt, and they remembered about the New Deal. A third indebtedness that we have to the US, with the U.S. is with President Lincoln, that now there's a new feature film that was just released, but an important sentence from President Lincoln, that when he says that democracy is the government by the people, for the people, and to the people. So, if all politicians in the world believed in this Lincoln's sentence, and if they were not afraid of the people, the world would be a much better world, a much more fairer world, and a much more democratic world we would live in today. And a last acknowledgement to the Executive Committee of the UAW, the Executive Board, because I received information that I am the first foreign politician invited to this event since the very first CAP conference held 50 years ago. So I am very much honored to be the very first foreigner. And so I couldn't better gift UAW with the team, the shirt from my team that just defeated the Chelsea soccer team in the World Tournament for soccer clubs. So very well, brothers and sisters, I brought a written speech, 15 pages, but Bob said to me, Lula, no reading speeches. No, you have to speak eye to all our brothers and sisters. And so that's how I will proceed. Very well. Bob has already said, and our professor Shaken also has said, I was elected the president of the local metal workers trade union in São Bernardo, where the automobile industry was heavily concentrated in São Paulo and São Bernardo. And we were experiencing a very difficult moment when I was elected president of the local metal workers trade union. We were under a military dictatorship, and it was not easy to develop trade union activities in those days. But I was very lucky to start to change the history of the labor movement in Brazil, changing the behavior of the labor leaders and of the union officials. We couldn't change change the labor laws, but we change the behavior of the union officials. The union officials, usually they would do leafletting in front of the plant gates, and then they wait the workers going to attend meetings in the union hall. If the workers didn't go to the union hall, the union officials would say, well, I fulfilled my obligation. I invited them to come to the union hall. They didn't come because they trust the executive board. And then life would go on. I decided that a union official, a union leader, should not stay at the union hall waiting for the workers to show up, to leave the plants to visit the union hall. So I decided to change. And so I started to go myself to the union, to the plant gates, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning to talk to the monthly paid workers, noon, during lunch hours, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the shift, changing shift at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at second shift at 5 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning for the graveyard shift, and so on and so forth. So we started to attend the plant gates as never before any other union official had done in my city. So what happened was that the workers started to see the union officials fulfilling their obligations. And so we started to perceive that we were winning over the confidence of the workers. And so we started to call for assemblies, and we perceived that the assemblies were not only just with very few people attending. There was a moment in 1978 that we were not calling assemblies for the union hall because it was too small. We started to call for assemblies at a soccer stadium for thousands of people. And this was very important. This was very important because the first strikes went on that were forbidden by the military regime. And the first strike was of a Swedish company, Saab Scania, where the workers in that plant, they stopped the machines. And then all that year, 1978, we had many strikes inside many plants. And one of the most important strikes in those days was a Ford plant strike, a 15-day strike. And then after the Ford plant went on strike, we managed to reach a good collective bargaining agreement that would serve all the workers. In 1979, we went back to strikes again. And in 1980, we went back to a strike of 41 days that lasted 41 days, and during the strike we didn't manage to win anything. We lost everything. We lost many workers in that strike. We didn't get our salaries. We didn't receive any salary increase. It was a very difficult time, but a miracle happened even when we were defeated in the strike. There was a miracle that happened. In the 1979 strike, where we had won everything during that strike, when the strike ended, the workers thought that they could have achieved more and that I did not let them achieve more. And so something important happened in that strike. We went to assembly, and the lawyer, the labor lawyer, he received a boo from the members. Another labor leader was to propose an agreement with the employers. He received a boo. A third labor leader was also suffered a boo. And then it was my time, the president of the Metal Workers Union, to speak. And I said, I can't receive a boo because that will demoralize the president of the union. So I said to the workers, I know that you don't want to reach a bargaining agreement. I know that if I put this to vote, I'm going to lose. So I'm not going to put the agreement to vote. I'm going to put to vote a vote of confidence and trust of on the president of the union. I put that under vote. And everybody in the assembly approved the vote of confidence for me. But they left that assembly They were cursing me when they left that assembly.
Eles me respeitavam
They
muito,
respected me a lot,
mas diziam, Lula se
but
vendeu
they
para
said,
Ford.
oh, he sold out to
Lula
Ford
se vendeu
Company,
para
he sold out to
Volkswagen. Lula se
Volkswagen,
vendeu
he
para
sold out to
Chrysler. Lula se vendeu
Chrysler
não sei
Company,
para
he
quem.
sold out to
Ou seja,
whoever
eu
else.
passei ano,
So
Bob,
I stayed for
ano,
1 year, Bob.
ano,
For 1 year,
indo na porta de
I
fábrica, e
visited
os
the plant
trabalhadores
gates,
não
and the
paravam
workers
para ouvir
did
o
not
sindicato.
stop to listen to me or
Foi
to the union
verdadeiro
officials.
inferno
It was a true inferno.
falar
It was hell.
para os
Like living
ouvidos
hell to
surdos
speak
dos
to the
trabalhadores.
deaf ears of the workers.
E eu, então,
And so then,
resolvi
after 1 year,
que nós íamos fazer
I
movimento
decided that
muito
we
mais
were going to
forte
develop a
em
stronger movement in 1980.
Nós fomos na porta de
And
fábrica
so we
em
went in
3
front of the
meses,
plant gate, and after 3
como
months,
não tínhamos ido
since
em 5
so
anos.
many times as we haven't visited these plant gates in
conseguimos
5
criar
years,
processo
and we
de
managed to develop
mobilização
a mobilization process,
Que fizemos uma das maiores
and
greves do
we
Brasil.
went on one of the
Não
largest
ganhamos
strikes in
nada.
Brazil. We didn't win anything. We didn't achieve anything with this big
Mas o
strike.
milagre
But the miracle
é
was
que o trabalhador
that
ganhou
the
consciência
worker
política.
built his political
Nós
consciousness with
voltamos a
this
trabalhar
strike.
sem salário,
We went back to work without
voltamos
a
a
salary
trabalhar
increase. We went back
devendo
to
conta
work
de luz,
owing
devendo
to
conta
pay
de
back
água,
our
devendo
our
gás.
bills, gas,
E
light,
quando eu pensava que os trabalhadores
bills and
tinham
gas bills, and
ficado
when I thought that the
nervosos
phone
com o
bills,
sindicato,
and when I thought that the unions were going to turn against the
trabalhadores me
union,
pediu
the
desculpas,
workers apologized to
porque em
me because in
79,
1979, in the
eles
previous
deveriam
year,
ter me
they should have
agradecido,
thanked me
e
for
eles
reaching
falavam
an
que eu
agreement,
tinha
and they
sido
said that I
corrompido.
was sold out.
E aquele ano
And
foi
so
tão
that year
importante
was so important
que eu então
that then
pude ver a
I
história
could see
se
the
movimentar
history
e
moving,
nós
turning its wheel and
dia
move forward,
10 de
and we managed on February the
criar
10th of
o Partido dos
1980
Trabalhadores.
to create the Workers' Party in Brazil.
E por que criamos o Partido
And why
dos
did we
Trabalhadores?
create a political party, the Workers'
Porque nós
Party?
descobrimos
Because we
que no
discovered
Congresso
that
Nacional
at the National
de
Congress
513 deputados
of 513 House representatives,
dois.
only 2
que eram trabalhadores.
came from the working
Dois
class. Only 2
E eu fiquei
came.
pensando,
And so I thought to
como é que a
myself,
gente quer
how can we
fazer
manage
leis
to have
em
the
benefício do
lawmakers
trabalhador,
make laws that will
se quem
benefit
é
the
eleito
workers
não é
if those that are elected officials are not
Quantos
coming from the working
deputados
class?
conhecem o
How
chão de
many
fábrica?
House representatives know the shop floor? Have been to a shop floor
Quantos
in their lives?
deputados sabem
How
o que
many
é morar
representatives
num lugar
knows
que dá
to live in
enchente?
a place that is flooded by water?
Quantos
How
deputados
many
ficaram
House
desempregados
representatives
ano ou 2 anos?
stayed unemployed for 1 year, 2
Quantos
years?
deputados
How many House
acordaram de
representatives
manhã
woke
sem
up
ter
in the
dinheiro para
morning
comprar
and
leite
having
e
money
pão
to
pros
buy
seus
milk
filhos?
and bread to their children?
E eu pensei, bom, nós
And
vamos
so
ter
I
que
thought,
organizar
no,
um
we're going to have to
partido político.
organize a political party.
E começamos a
And
organizar,
so we started to
e não foi
organize a political
fácil.
party, and it wasn't
Foi muito
easy.
difícil.
It was a very
Porque tinha
difficult
muita gente
task
que
because there were a
dizia
lot
que
of people that would say that
democrático, que era
they were
favorável à
Democrats, that they
organização
were
política.
favorable of political
Mas quando nós
organization, but
tentamos
when
criar,
we
eles
started
não
to
eram
create a
tão
political party, they were not as
e não queriam
democratic
tanta
as they
organização
thought they
política.
were, and they didn't
O que
want
eles
to
queriam
participate in
era
political
que os
organization.
trabalhadores
What they wanted that the
continuassem a
workers
ser apenas
to continue to
eleitores
be
e
just
bater palma para
voters
eles no
and
palanque.
applause the
E nós, então,
politicians
dissemos,
in the
nós
podium. And then we
queremos
said, no,
continuar batendo palma,
we want to
mas para nós
continue to
mesmos.
applaud the
Nós vamos
politicians, but
subir
to
no palanque
ourselves, to our
e nós seremos
representatives. We will go
candidatos
up
daqui para
to
frente
the stage
para
and
mudar
we'll
isso.
run with our own candidates, with our own party members.
Hoje,
Today,
orgulhosamente, eu posso
with
dizer
great
para
pride,
vocês
I can say to all of
que em
you
20 anos,
that in 20 years,
de 82
from
a
1982
2002, quando
to
eu cheguei à presidência,
2002, when I
nós
reached the presidency of
o
Brazil,
partido de esquerda mais
we
importante
created the
da América
most
Latina.
important
Eu não
left-wing
digo do
party in
mundo
Latin
porque tem a
America. I don't
China,
say the world because there's China,
e
they're
com a
bigger
China
than
a
us.
gente não compete.
And with China, there's no way to compete with
Porque eles
China.
serão
They're too
sempre
big
muitas vezes
because
mais
they'll
do que a
always be
gente.
larger than us. There's no way to
Mas
compete with
criamos
China.
partido político
But we
mais
did
importante.
created the most important
E preste
political
bem,
party
2
from the
anos
left.
depois,
2 years after
criamos a
that,
Central Única
we
dos
created the
Trabalhadores.
CUT, the National Labor Federation,
Diferentemente do
CUT,
mundo,
different from the
em
rest
que
of
as
the
centrais
world,
criavam
where the
partido, foi o partido que ajudou
unions
a
created
criar
the
a
parties.
Central,
The political in
e
Brazil
a
was the
CUT é, sem
different.
dúvida
The
nenhuma,
political party
a
that created
maior
the labor
central
federation, and the
sindical da
labor
América
federation is
Latina.
the
Você
CUT is the
conhece
largest
que
labor
tem poucas
federation
centrais
in Latin
sindicais
America. There are very
que
few
têm
national labor
organização
federation that has
e o
so many
trabalho
workers
combativo que
organized
tem a Central Única dos
and so
Trabalhadores.
active as the CUT is in Brazil,
Isso me
created by
permitiu,
us. This
Bob
allowed me,
e
Bob,
companheiro da UAW,
and other brothers and sisters from
vislumbrar a
UAW to
possibilidade
envisage
de que
the
os trabalhadores
possibility
tinham um
that
papel
the workers
político
can
aí
have a
nisso.
political role to play in
Porque a nossa
society.
luta não é uma
Because
luta
our struggle
apenas
is not
econômica.
only an economic struggle.
Não é uma luta apenas por aumento
It
de
can't be
salário.
only to increase
Eu
our
quero
wages.
salário.
I want a wage increase, but I want cheaper public transportation. I want a better wage, but I want a better, cheaper house. I want salaries, but I want to have access to culture, to leisure. I want that my son goes to study in a university. I want to have a free and public university in my country. And that's how that we started to develop a political trust. And with great adversity, with many adversaries, and not always the media supported us. Not always the media understood our role, and I never complained against the media, because I think it's part of the democratic game, those that are against and those that are in favor. But the fact of the matter is, my dear brother Bob, is that all this fight, all this struggle, made me reach the presidency of the Republic in 2002. But don't think it was easy, that it was an easy road, because I lost elections for governorship in 1982. Then I lost presidential elections in 1989 at the first time. I lost a second presidential elections in 1994. I lost a third presidential elections in 1998. So, no one could stand me anymore. Lula running again for presidency? But I had almost a sort of an obsession that I wanted to win the elections to prove that I had much more competence than the Brazilian elite that ruled Brazil till those years. I wanted to prove that prejudice is a disease. Prejudice is a perverse disease. And I had to prove that it's not a university degree that helps people to make political decisions. The university degree teaches you to be an engineer, teaches you to be a doctor, a scientist, to be anything you want. But the university degree, there's no school to train for presidency, for governors, for senators. No, that is in the character and the education and what he brings from his family and birth and the commitment that he has with his people that he wants to represent. And I had to prove that. That's what makes the politician, not the university degree. And I had to prove that. Very well. And when even myself, I couldn't bear myself as a candidate running once again, then that the generosity of the Brazilian people finally elected me the president of Brazil. And I was elected, Bob, with a firm conviction that everybody could make mistakes. But I couldn't afford to make mistakes myself, because if I made a mistake, never more in history, someone from the working class could run for the presidency of my country. And I'm going to tell you a very short story that happened here in Washington, D.C. on December the 10th. In 2002, I was elected, I was president-elect in Brazil, and President Bush from the U.S. invites me to come to the White House. And I come to the White House to talk with President Bush. It was 2002, and there was an environment, a very nervous environment because of the 9/11 attacks, and so he was under the obsession to invade Iraq. So it was a very nervous period, and he spoke for 40 minutes with me at the White House about the need to invade Iraq, and that we had to fight terrorism, and we had to fight Iraq, and he was very nervous talking about Iraq all the time. I was a metal worker. I never thought about even entering the White House in my lifetime. And there I was for the first time. A metal worker from São Bernardo in São Paulo go inside the White House. And then I'm now face to face to the president of the U.S. that I just watched him on the television talking about to invade Iraq and war on terrorism. After he spoke for 40 minutes, he said, President, I would like that Brazil would come together and join the U.S. in this undertaking, in this enterprise. I told President Bush, let me say to you the following. First of all, Mr. President, man that took care of the investigation, if there were chemical weapons or not in Iraq before, he was a Brazilian ambassador that was in charge of the investigation, and he told me there was no chemical weapons in Iraq. Secondly, President Bush, Iraq is 14,000 kilometers away from Brazil. I never met Saddam Hussein in my life. I never even went close to Baghdad. So my enemy is not Iraq, Mr. President. My enemy is hunger, the hunger of the Brazilian people, of more than 50 million people. That is my war against want, war on want. And so it was with this conviction that I started to rule my country. Here, there's a very important economist here, Paulo Nogueira. He's one of the most important economists from Brazil, and certainly he's one of the most important economists today working at the IMF. Stand up, Paulo, and so that everybody can see who you are, okay? When the metal workers, the auto workers in the U.S. want to hit someone in the IMF, look at his face, and you can hit him harder. And do what you have to do if you're... And he knows very well that when I reached the presidency in January the 1st, when I took office in 2003, Brazil didn't have money to pay for its imports. Brazil owed $30 billion to the IMF. And Brazil had a trade balance of $60 billion. That's more or less. And a trade flow and a trade balance between imports and exports of $107 billion. And inflation was around almost 12% a month, almost reaching 17% a month. Well, I thought, what am I going to do if we don't have even money to pay back our imports that we need? So then I thanked to some people that had the trust, the confidence in Brazil. And so possibly we made the largest fiscal adjustment that anyone have ever made before, because I had 80% of public opinion polls of approval, and so I decided to spend a little bit of the political fat that I had after my elections to make the sacrifice that I had to do in my first year of my term, so then afterwards I can improve the lives of the Brazilian people. And that's what happened. We had a very difficult situation in the year 2003, the first year, but in 2004 the economy started to take off, and then we started to create new jobs. And in 2003, even when Brazil had facing a very difficult situation, I created a new program, the family stipend, the Bolsa Família, which had the objective to guarantee a minimum of food for the poorest people in the country. And the family stipend and the zero hunger program was coupled to another program, to the family stipend program, where we hand out a small amount of money to the woman, and it's the woman that receives the magnetic card. We don't deliver the card to the man, we deliver it to the wife, because man, if he gets that money, he'll go to some pub and drink some beer, so we decided to give it to the mother, to the household. So she would receive the magnetic card. She receives the magnetic card, and today this family stipend program serves 50 million Brazilians. 50 million Brazilians received this magnetic card, the family stipend, and it was improved with another program, a new program with the new President Dilma, that is Brazil Without Poverty, and that has involved another 16 million people that now started to receive a little bit more money. These are people living under the poverty line. And what is the woman's obligation? They have to put her children in school to get that money. And second, she has to have the vaccination of her children too. And thirdly, conditionality, if she's pregnant, she has to undergo all the prenatal egg tests that medicine recommends. These are the conditionalities to receive that program. In those days, my adversary said that Lula was handing out money to beggars. This is just social work. This would not solve the economy problems. And I wasn't mad when I received this criticism, because I understand someone that hands over $100 as a tip after drinking 10 Scotch whiskeys, he can't manage to understand, or she can understand the meaning of $80, $100 for a poor woman. They don't know what it means to take back $100 to that home. If that person that has full of prejudice had access to the testimonies of the poor about our program, they would perceive the miracle that $50 can do in the hands of a very poor person in want. They would perceive the miracle of a mother that would have 2 daughters and that she would buy a pencil. She would buy one pencil. She would buy a color pencil for her children to draw. Because she didn't have money, she would break the pencil in 2 and give half pencil to each one of the daughters because she couldn't afford to buy a pencil. And this mother said, now with the family stipend program, I can buy a box full of pencils for each one of my daughters. Well, besides the family stipend programs, we have some of the important labor leaders in my country are here. During 8 years while I was in the presidency, and now in 2 years with President Dilma in office, every year, 90% of the collective bargaining agreements reached in Brazil, the workers are having salary increases above the past inflation. And for 10 years in a row, the workers are getting salary increases above inflation. And we never demanded that the workers would go to sacrifices so that we can solve the economic problems in our country. No, we never demanded that from the workers because in the majority of the cases, the workers never had the responsibility for the crisis, the economic crisis that the country went through. Those that have the blame on do not pay the sacrifice of the crisis. The workers that have to pay. And we increased the minimum wage in Brazil in 74% in these 10 years. And all that was done in controlling inflation. We had inflation in the country because before I reached the office, they said, if you increase salaries, inflation will come back. If you increase the minimum wage, inflation will come back. We increased the minimum wage. The workers had an actual salary increase, and inflation is under control in Brazil today. So it's a clear-cut demonstration that it is possible to do that. Another important thing that we did was on the credit issue. Credit lines. And I said in an interview, Brazil was the only capitalist country in the world that the CBS 60 Minutes, you saw that had no capital. There was no credit lines in Brazil. It didn't exist. People, poor, couldn't even enter a bank branch. If he went inside a bank branch, they would think it's a robbery. The police would go after them. So, the credit line policy that we developed, credit for retirees, we created something, lending against the paychecks, because the bankers would not lend money to the workers because the workers could not present a collateral. So we offered as a collateral their paycheck. Their salary served as a collateral where they could pay back that loan at the most 30% of his paycheck or the value of his salary as an installment payment for that loan. And that was a revolution in Brazil in terms of opening new credit line because the workers now had access to money. And in 6 years, in 8 years, we have lended $90 billion within this program of lending against the paychecks to the workers. $90 billion were lended to workers in Brazil. And we also lended money for small farmers that are responsible for 70% of the meals that we eat in Brazil come from small farmers. We also lended money to small and medium-sized entrepreneurs. We also organized co-ops of streets, of garbage scavengers in the streets. And we lend them money, too, to these scavengers. And so their collateral is their honor. They honor their loans with their own honor. And Brazil that trusted so many to lend money to the elite, to the ruling class, and lost money and wasted money. Now we thought it was time to lend money to the poor, and the collateral that the poor would give us would be the honor that they carry. And the poor pays back their loans because they only have their own face as their asset, and they're proud of the face that they carry, their own face as their assets. And besides that, we developed another important thing. Another important thing is that we made an investment in education, huge investments in education. I'm very proud to say to you what I'm going to say now. I developed a program, a scholarship program called ProUni, Pro-University. The private universities in Brazil would say to the government, the poor students could not run for a vacancy for a seat in private universities in Brazil because the public schools were very poor, of poor quality. So I developed a new program, and so I would swap the tax debts that the private university had with the government for scholarships for the poor that lived in the periphery. And this year, we now reached to 1,300,000 youngsters attending university programs because of this program called Pro-University. Students that couldn't afford university. So, I was the only president of Brazil that did not carry a higher education diploma, degree, university degree. My vice president was a great entrepreneur, a great businessman in Brazil. His company had 17,000 employees. And he also didn't carry a university degree, the vice president. And so we already went into history in Brazil as the president and vice president that created built more public universities in Brazil in the history of Brazil. We built 14 new public and free federal universities and 126 extension courses in the countryside and 214 vocational training schools. These are all public and free schools. Just for you to have an idea of what this means, in 100 years of the history of Brazil, the Brazilian elite built 140 vocational training schools. In 1 century, they built 140 vocational training schools. In 80 years, we built 214 vocational training schools. Besides that, now President Dilma developed a new program in Brazil Without Borders to grant scholarships to 100,000 youngsters in Brazil to study abroad, in university abroad. And she also created a vocational training program to train 6 million youngsters in Brazil. So we know very well that the way the world is moving forward in progress, we don't want to be exporters of commodities, soybeans. No, we want to export intelligence, knowledge, and this is what's going to make that the 21st century should make the difference in the lives of people. Very well. There's one thing, Bob, that you have to get to know. First, I didn't want to run for a second term. I was afraid of a second term. And the majority of the people, during their second term, it doesn't work out well. They come out worse than their first term. The second term is so dangerous for a president that if you do the same thing that you did in the first term, you lost already. You have to do better in the second term than what you did in the first term. You got to do much better. So I decided that I will only run for a second term if I can do something better than I did in the first term. So I developed a new development program for Brazil for 4 years. On January the 1st of 2007 till December the 31st of 2010. It's called the Accelerated Growth Program. I explained what I was going to do, and I dedicated 4 years of my second term to develop such acceleration growth program. The shipbuilding industry in Brazil was the second largest shipbuilding industry in the 70s in Brazil. In the year 2000, it only had 1,000 workers still working in that industry because the Brazilian rulers would say that Brazil would not know to make probes for deep oil prospection. They don't know how to build offshore platforms and boats and ships. And I told them, no, they did. Brazil can do it. 4 years after I was in office, the shipbuilding industry had only 1,000 workers left. Now they have 76,000 workers working in the shipbuilding industry today, and it's growing even more. Today, the 3 largest hydroelectrical power plants in the world being built here are in Brazil. 10,000 kilometers of railroad is being built in Brazil. Of railroads and highways, we have 5 refineries that are being built in Brazil simultaneously. And Petrobras, which is the state oil-owned company, has $254 billion to invest till the year 2017. to explore oil in deep waters. We have the World FIFA Cup and the Olympic Games and your friendship. So there's no way Brazil not be a success. There's no way for Brazil not to become itself in the fifth largest economy in the world till the year 2016. So, Bob, I would like to end because I know you have an important game to follow and watch soon, and people are hungry too. So I'm going to just say two things to end my speech. The crisis, the world global financial crisis. I want to be very brief and say to you that I believe that the crisis is economic, and there's responsibility of the financial sector that was not regulated. It was unregulated. That is to say, in many countries, the rulers did not pay attention to the bankers or what they were doing. The bankers could do anything that they wanted. They were highly unregulated. It seemed that they were semi-gods, the bankers. And maybe you don't know, but as president of a country, a poor country like Brazil, people would come to Brazil giving us orders in the past. Any American banker or British banker would come to Brazil some years ago and say, "You're incompetent. We know how to fix things. We know the homework that you have to do." They were wise and we were stupid. That's what they used to do. They give hunches about the Brazilian economy in the 80s and 90s, and the Bolivian economy, the Mexican economy. They knew how to do the homework. And their banks were going down, they were breakdown in their banks. They didn't know what, and they didn't know what to do. And they didn't know an elementary thing that you can't learn in university. It's something that is very elementary. The financial system did not come up to produce paper notes only. The financial sector exists to subsidize and lend money to the productive sector, to the true economy, to the real economy of each country. That's what the financial system should work for. So the subprime crisis is absurd. I can't imagine how it happened. And the crisis in Europe, it's unimaginable that it happened in Greece. 6 years ago, it would cost $30 billion to fix the crisis. Not even $200 billion would solve the Greek problem today. So, $9 trillion, or a little bit more, was already spent to bail out the world from this crisis, the financial world. And how much they spent to save the workers? How much did they spend to save the workers? How much money was tapped in to save the workers in many countries in the world that aren't employed and suffering? The rulers forgot that to confront a crisis such as this one, it would be necessary to confront the crisis, creating more job opportunities, more credit lines, and more financing. If there is one rotten credit, let's put that rotten credit aside. Why bail out the bank and not bail out the worker? Why do we have to bail out the banks and not the workers? Why don't we rescue the workers?
Olha, eu não sou radical, não.
I'm not a radical.
Não sou radical.
I'm not a radical.
Eu sei a diferença de
I know
fazer
the difference of making a speech
na prática.
and to rule in practice. It's
Mas eu
quite
acho
different to run governments. It's different than making
dirigentes
speech, but I believe that the political leaders,
Tem que assumir.
they have to take responsibility,
político
and they have to
para o
take
qual
the
foram
political role that they were elected for.
Não pode
They
terceirizar
cannot
a política.
outsource politics. They have to do it
política-
themselves. They cannot outsource politics.
Eu vou tentar traduzir isso numa linguagem popular.
Let me
Bob, pra você
translate this
entender.
in a popular language, Bob, so that I
Por
hope you
que
can
que a
understand.
empresa
Why can the company
Nunca manda o dono da empresa
never
negociar
sends
com
the
você.
owner of the company to negotiate with you to the bargaining table?
O sindicato
The
sempre
trade
manda a
unions,
pessoa
they
mais
always send
importante
the
para
most
negociação.
important person to
Mas a
bargain
empresa manda
on behalf of the
uma
workers.
pessoa
But
de
the company
terceiro escalão.
sends someone from the third level
Por
of
quê?
management, lower level of
Porque esse
management.
representante
Why?
da
Because
empresa,
this company's
Ele
representative,
vai negociar
he's going to bargain
porque a única coisa
because
que
the
ele
only
pode
thing
dizer
that he can
é não.
say is no.
Ele não pode dizer sim.
He can't say yes. So that's
Ele não
why
pode
they
dizer
send
sim.
him. He can't say
Então,
yes. He can
quando-
only say no.
pessoa mais importante
when the
do
most
sindicato
important person from the
senta
trade
na
union
frente,
sits in
representante
front
da
of the
empresa,
representative of the company on the
se
bargaining,
ele
at the bargaining
consegue
table,
convencer
and
o
if he
representante
managed to
da empresa,
convince the
ele não
company's
diz sim.
representative, he won't
Ele
say
fala,
yes, he will say,
eu tenho que consultar.
well, I have to consult my superiors, I have to consult my boss.
Não é isso?
Isn't that true?
Pois bem, na política,
Very well. In
eu
politics,
participei da
I
Organização Mundial do
participated
Comércio
in the World Trade
tentando negociar.
Organization meetings, the WTO, the
Eu,
World
durante
Trade
muito tempo, era o
Organization.
único
And for a long
presidente que
time,
ia.
I was the only president that attended the WTO
E por que
meetings.
que os outros presidentes
And
não
why
vão?
did the other heads of state didn't attend the
porque os
WTO
funcionários vão lá
meetings?
para dizer
Because
não,
they're going
e
to
não
go
para
there
dizer
to say no and not to say yes.
Então a gente
For
nunca
those that are
conseguiu fazer
negotiating it.
acordo.
So that's why we never managed to reach a
tivesse
trade
feito,
agreement. If we
poderia
reach a
estar
trade
melhorando o
agreement,
mundo
we
hoje.
could have improved the world's
Porque
condition
na crise
today.
nós precisamos de mais
Because during the
comércio.
crisis, we need more trade in the
Precisamos de
world.
mais comércio, de
Not
mais
less
troca de
trade. We need
produtos.
more trade. We trade our products from our countries.
Olha, eu peço a Deus.
So I ask God, I ask for God.
Vocês não sabem o quanto eu torci.
You don't know how much I was cheering for President Obama's re-election
Eu acho,
and his first election.
eu acho que pela história
I
extraordinária
believe,
desse país,
because of the extraordinary
Eu acho que a eleição
past
do
history
negro
of the
era
U.S.,
necessária.
to elect an
Como foi
African
necessária a
American
eleição
was
do
necessary,
metalúrgico no
as it was
Brasil.
necessary to elect a metal worker for president
foi
in Brazil,
necessária a eleição
as it
do
was
índio na
necessary to
Bolívia.
elect an indigenous people representative
tem
in
gente que não
Bolivia,
gosta do Evo
because some
Morales.
people don't enjoy Evo
Mas o
Morales
Evo,
in Bolivia.
ele é a
But
própria
Evo,
Bolívia.
he
A
is
cara
like,
dele é da
like the
Bolívia.
Bolivian. He
Ele
has
se
the
veste
face of
como a
Bolivian. He
Bolívia.
dresses like
Ele
a
fala como a
Bolivian,
Bolívia.
and he speaks like the indigenous
Tinha
people of
presidente da
Bolivia.
Bolívia que nem
And he's
falava
the president.
boliviano, nem
There was a
falava
president in
espanhol.
Bolivia in the past that didn't
Não
even
falava
speak
inglês.
Spanish, only spoke in English in his
Então,
own
o
country.
Obama,
So President Obama,
eu peço a Deus.
so I ask for God,
Sabe, que o Obama
I pray for
saiba
God that
uma
Obama
coisa que mexeu
should
com a minha cabeça.
do something that I
Eu
think
tinha certeza que eu
really
não
upset
podia
me.
errar.
I knew that I couldn't afford to make
E
a
o
mistake.
Obama tem que ter
And
isso na
Obama has to
cabeça.
have this
Ele
consciousness.
não pode
He cannot
errar,
afford to make
porque
mistakes
senão nunca
because
mais
never
um negro
more
vai
in
ser
the history of the
presidente
U.S.
dos
an
Estados
Afro-American will be elected again in the
preconceito
U.S.
é muito
The
forte.
prejudice is very strong in this
preconceito é
country.
muito
The
forte.
prejudice is
E as
very
pessoas
strong.
trabalham o
And
preconceito.
people are working with
como
prejudice.
ele é uma figura
And since he's
extremamente
a
competente e
very highly
inteligente,
competent, intelligent
e teve a
figure,
maioria do
and
povo,
he has the support
eu
of the
penso
majority
que
of the
Obama
American people, I believe that Obama,
presidenta
and I
Dilma
pray for God that President Dilma in Brazil
trabalharem
too,
juntos,
if they work together,
podem
I believe that they
ajudar
can make a
pouco
difference and they can
a
help a
classe
little bit
política
the
a
political
fazer
class
pouco mais
to do a little bit
do que foi
more
feito até
than
agora.
what they have done till now.
Olha,
So,
eu trouxe aqui para mostrar para vocês.
I brought here to show you all
No G20,
at the G20 meeting
2 de abril de
of
2009.
April the 2nd of 2009 in
Eu
London.
vou só mostrar as decisões que nós
I'm just going
tomamos.
to show you the decisions that were made in the
Restaurar
G20
a
meeting
confiança,
to restore the
O
confidence,
crescimento e os empregos.
growth, and jobs in the world.
Reparar o sistema
To
financeiro
fix the
e
financial
restaurar o
system
crédito.
and restore credit lines.
Fortalecer a
To
regulação
strengthen
financeira
financial
a fim de
regulation
reconstruir a
so that we
confiança.
can rebuild the trust in banks,
Capitalizar e reformar
to
nossas
capitalize and
instituições
reform
financeiras.
our financial
Mudar o
institutions,
FMI e
to
o
change
Banco
the
Mundial.
IMF and the World Bank policies,
Promover o comércio
to
e
promote
investimentos globais.
trade and global
E
investments,
rejeitar o
and
protecionismo
reject
para garantir
protectionism to
prosperidade.
guarantee prosperity for all.
E promover
And to
a
promote
retomada do crescimento
the
que
growth,
seja
economic
inclusiva,
growth again, that would be
verde e
inclusive,
sustentável.
green, and sustainable.
Estamos adotando
And so we are
expansão fiscal
adopting
sem
fiscal
precedentes
expansion
de
policies,
forma
unprecedented,
coordenada,
in a coordinated
que
way
irá totalizar
that will
5
totalize
trilhões de
$5
dólares,
trillion,
aumentará a
and
produção
it will
em
increase
4%
production in
e
4% in the world,
acelerará
and it will accelerate
a transição
the
para uma
transition
economia ambientalmente
to a
sustentável.
sustainable
E
environmentally
demais,
economy,
comprometemos
and we commit
fazer
ourselves
esforço
to make
fiscal
all the
sustentado
sustainable
na
fiscal
escala
efforts
necessária
at the
a
necessary
fim
scale
de
so that we can
voltar ao crescimento
go
e
back
gerar
to
emprego.
growth and create jobs. That
Isso
is the
nós
G20
decidimos
statement from
2 de
London
abril
in April the
em
2nd
Londres.
in 2009.
O que aconteceu?
But what happened after this statement, the G20 statement?
Quase nada.
Almost nothing.
Porque as medidas
Why not?
tomadas
Because
não
the
foram
measures that were undertaken
medidas
were not these
tomadas
ones that are in the
foram
statement. The measures that were taken were orthodox
Corta crédito.
measures. Cut credit lines.
diminuir investimento
Diminished
interno em muitos
investments.
países
Domestic investments in many countries went down.
e
And
asfixiar a economia
to
na
strangle
tentativa de
the
salvar
economy
quem?
to try to save who?
Muito mais
To
os
save
responsáveis pela crise.
much more those that were
Eu queria dizer a
responsible for the
vocês,
crisis.
companheiros,
So very well, brothers and sisters, I
movimento
would like to
sindical
say
tem
that the labor
papel a
movement has an important role to play.
O movimento sindical,
The labor movement,
nesse momento histórico,
in this historical
não
moment,
pode aceitar
cannot accept
que uma empresa
the
chamada
idea that a
Nissan
company like
venha
Nissan,
aos
the
Estados
Nissan
Unidos
company, comes to
e
America
diga que não
and
pode
say
sindicalizar
that they cannot
trabalhadores.
accept the workers
Não é
to organize
possível.
themselves. We cannot allow that to happen.
Não é possível.
This is unimaginable. It's impossible.
Não é possível, Bob,
So, Bob, I can't
Não é
imagine. It's
possível
unimaginable
que as pessoas não
that
tenham lido
people have not read
a frase do Lincoln quando
Lincoln's
dizia
sentence
que
when he said
democracia é o
that
governo do
democracy
povo,
is the
pelo
government
povo e
by
para
the
o
people,
povo.
for the people.
Não é possível que
And so-
em pleno século XXI
It's unimaginable that in
Algum
the
empresário
21st
de
century that
algum
there's
lugar
some
do
businessman
mundo
in somewhere, any place in the
jogue a
world,
culpa
could put the
da
blame
sindicalização
on unionization
como uma coisa que não
as
presta.
something that is rotten, that is
Tente
not
culpar
worthwhile.
o sindicato,
You have to
sabe,
put the
por
blame on
alguma
the
coisa que
unions
aconteça na empresa.
of something that
Não é
happens to the
explicável.
company. No, that is unimaginable that
Não é-
someone
não é
still has this kind of
possível de
reasoning. We can't understand it. We can't imagine or understand
Então,
such reasoning.
possivelmente,
So possibly,
Nós temos nos
we
acomodado durante muito
maybe accommodated ourselves for a long while.
Possivelmente nós sejamos
Possibly
culpados.
we're the ones to blame for.
tempo. Possivelmente a gente
Possibly,
tem
maybe
emprego, comprou
we
nossa
have our
casa,
jobs, we
comprou
bought
nosso
our
carro,
houses, and we
guardou
bought our
dinheirinho para colocar
car,
nosso filho
we
na
saved some money to
universidade,
put our kids in the
e
university,
sossegamos.
and then we
qual
just
é a
settled
diferença entre
down.
vocês
But what is
e
the
nós no
difference
Brasil?
between you and us in
que
Brazil?
nós
The fact is
temos
that we
que
in
lutar
Brazil,
muito
we still have to struggle a lot
para chegar onde
to
vocês
reach
chegaram.
where you have already reached, American workers.
E vocês têm que
And
lutar
you
mais
now
ainda
have to struggle
para
even
não
more than
permitir
ever
que
not
vocês
to allow
voltem
that
a
you go
passado
back to a
onde
past
vocês não
where
tinham nada.
you did not have rights as you have
Vocês-
today. You cannot
Vocês-
allow that to happen. You all,
Trabalhadores americanos,
American U.S. workers,
trabalhadores americanos não
US
conquistaram o que
workers,
conquistaram porque algum
did
governo
not
quis dar.
achieve what they achieved because some government
Nós tivemos
granted
governos
them
mais
achievements.
comprometidos e
We
menos
had some
comprometidos.
governments that were more committed to the working class and
verdade é que
others
vocês
not.
mudaram muito.
But the truth of the matter is that you changed a lot.
Você
You're the
sabe
ones that did
quantos de
it.
vocês,
You know how
quantas
many
mulheres
of
e
you, how
homens
many
fizeram
men and women
sacrifício
made
para
sacrifices
conquistar o direito
to
viver
reach the
dignamente.
right to live with dignity.
possível
And so I can't
Deus
imagine
mercado,
that the God
que nos
marketplace,
anos 80,
that in
nos
the
anos
80s
90
and in
até
the
2000,
90s until the
sabia
year
de tudo.
2000 knew how to do
Tente
everything.
jogar nas nossas
And now
costas
try to put over our
a
shoulders the
responsabilidade
responsibility
pela ganância do lucro.
for the greed for profits that we've seen
Pela
in
má
the,
aplicação dos
for
recursos.
bad investment that was made.
Então eu quero que você saiba
So,
aqui do Bob.
my dear Bob, I would like you to
que
let you
vocês têm
know
papel
that you
extraordinário.
play an extraordinary
Eu digo
role.
vocês porque
I say you all
a UAW é
because
sindicato
UAW is a trade
muito
union
forte,
that is very
de
strong,
muita qualidade.
great quality union,
acho que nós
and I
precisamos
believe
começar a
that we
conversar com
need
os
to
nossos
start to
líderes.
talk with our leaders
No G20, no
at the
G8
G20
quiser,
meetings or
seja,
any
o
other
presidente Obama
international
tem que
meeting.
ouvir
President
vocês,
Obama has to
a
listen
Dilma
to
tem que
all
ouvir
of
o
you.
sindicato,
President Dilma has
os
to listen to the
argentinos.
Brazilian
Ou
workers, the
seja, o
Argentinian
movimento
president.
sindical
The
precisa
labor
outra vez
movement
começar
once
a
again
dizer
starts
o que
to
ele deseja.
say what
E
it
para que a
wants
gente, governante,
and to convey its
cumpra aquilo
message.
que nós
And so the
aprovamos.
rulers should fulfill
Que não vire letra
what
morta.
we committed in this statement.
E também
And also
que vocês, trabalhadores,
that you workers
nunca digam
never should
Eu não
say
sou político.
that I'm not in politics, that
Eu
I
não
don't
gosto de
enjoy
política.
politics. I don't
Nunca
like
diga.
politicians. Never say that.
eu
Never say that.
nunca pensei em ser dirigente sindical.
I never thought that I would be
Virei
elected a union official, and I became the
Eu
president of
nunca
my
pensei em
union.
ser
And then I never
político,
thought of
criei
becoming a
partido.
politician. Then I created a
Eu
political
nunca
party.
pensei em ser
I never thought that
candidato a
I could be run
vereador,
for city
a síndico
councilor,
do prédio que eu
or
morava.
even to run the condo
Virei
there where I
presidente.
lived. And I became the president of Brazil.
Tudo isso
All that was
Porque a luta
unimaginable
foi fazendo
because the
com que eu
struggle
desse
made
passo
me
atrás
to
de
move
passo.
steps forward,
Eu era
step by step.
perseverante. Eu não
And I
desisti.
persevered. I never give
Não há
up.
espaço na
There's
minha
no
vida
room in my
para
life to give up.
falo pra minha
I
mulher
don't
todo
give.
dia,
I
Marisa,
tell my wife
não
every day,
espere.
Maria said, don't wait. Don't
falo
expect
pra
me.
Marisa, não
And I tell
espere
Maria,
que eu
don't
morra
expect
dentro
that I
de
will
casa.
die inside my
Tossindo.
home. Get coughing because
Eu,
of
se
the
tiver
President
que
Lula had
morrer
a
dia,
throat
quando Deus
cancer.
quiser,
If I have to die because
ser num
when God
palanque,
wishes, it's going to be up
vai
on
ser
the
em algum
podium, up
lugar,
on some
falando
stage,
alguma coisa,
making some
brigando com
speech,
alguém,
fighting with
porque
somebody
eu não sei ficar em
because I can't stay at
Mas
home.
eu queria terminar dando recado
So I
para
would like to
vocês,
end conveying the following message
Tem
to
dia,
all
Bob.
of you. Bob,
que você acorda de manhã
I would like that you, when you wake up in the morning, and you, all of you,
achando que tá tudo errado.
thinking that everything is wrong.
Não é isso?
Isn't
Tá
that
tudo
true?
errado.
There's some days
O
that we
deputado
wake
não
up,
presta,
the politician is worthless,
governador não
the
presta,
governor is lousy,
O Partido Democrata
The
não
Democrat
presta.
Party is lousy.
O Partido Republicano
The
não
Republican
presta.
Party is even worse.
E você vai falando,
And
você
so,
vai falando, e vai
and
falando.
you
Porque
he's
o Obama
talking,
não está
talking,
fazendo
talking.
nada,
Obama's not
porque
doing
não sei quem
anything
não faz
because
nada,
no
o
one is
senador não
doing
faz
anything.
nada.
The senator
Você
doesn't
fica
do anything,
desanimado e fala,
and then
não
you're
vale a pena.
you're losing enthusiasm. It's
Eu queria
not
dizer pra
worthwhile.
vocês
So
uma
I
coisa,
wanted to convey
que é
the
uma
following
lição de
message. It's a lesson of life that I
dia
received in the day
Que vocês acordarem
that you wake up in the morning without
não
enthusiasm,
acreditarem mais em
that you
nada,
don't believe in anything
achar que
anymore,
nada mais
and you
vale a
think
pena.
nothing is worthwhile anymore in life.
ao invés de desistir.
Instead of giving up,
Pense no seguinte:
think in the
o
following.
político,
The politician,
bom,
the good politician,
honesto,
the honest politician,
trabalhador,
the working politician, the
competente,
competent
que
politician
vocês querem,
that you want
não está dentro de mim,
is not inside
Está dentro de
me.
vocês.
It's inside yourselves.
está dentro de
It's
cada um de
inside
vocês.
yourselves, in each one of you.
Então,
So
assumam,
take over responsibility.
assuma a
So
responsabilidade
take over responsibility, each one of
de
you,
ver
to see
dezenas de deputados
that
metalúrgicos no Congresso.
to elect many metal
E ver dezenas
auto
de
workers
senadores
at the
no
Congress,
Congresso.
to elect
Quantos tem?
many auto workers in the Senate. How many auto workers
Quantos
you have in the
conhecem o
Congress?
Fábio?
How many have ever been to a shop floor in their
Quantos já
lives?
arrancaram o
How
dedo
many
na
have
fábrica?
lost
Quantos
a
já arrancaram
finger
uma
in or a nail in the plant?
Ou seja,
lost their nail or
nós
the
não
finger.
queremos mal a
So
ninguém, mas nós queremos
we don't
nós
want to do any bad
nos
to people,
representar.
but we want us
Porque
ourselves
quando
to
se
be
trata de
represented there. Because
defender o
when
direito
we
dos
want to
trabalhadores,
advocate for the workers'
ninguém
rights,
vai defender
no one else
se não
is going to
for os
advocate for
próprios
workers' rights. It has to be the workers
trabalhadores. E vocês
themselves
sabem
to
disso.
defend themselves, and you know
Vocês
that.
sabem.
And that's the job for the workers themselves to
Então,
do it.
companheiros,
So, dear brothers and sisters,
eu quero terminar, Bob,
I would like
dizendo
to
a
end,
você
Bob, saying to you
que eu
that
tenho confiança
I have the
que o
confidence
movimento sindical
that the
tem
labor
papel
movement
muito
has an
importante a
important
cumprir.
role to play in the world today.
Você pode contar
And you can
comigo
count with me
pessoalmente, e eu
personally,
tenho certeza que o
and I'm
sindicato
sure that the
brasileiro,
Brazilian trade unions
que
will
não é
support you,
possível uma empresa
and
não
we
querer que o
cannot
trabalhador se
allow or
sindicalize, não é
imagine that
possível
a company
ameaçar
goes
trabalhador.
against the workers
Não é
when they want to
possível,
organize
no
themselves in
século
unity. In the
XXI, quando
21st century, when we're talking about democracy,
globalização,
when we're talking about
globaliza isso,
globalization,
globaliza
let's
aquilo.
globalize this
E
and
cadê a
that,
globalização
and then
do
where's
direito dos
globalization of the
trabalhadores?
workers' rights? That's what we
Cadê a
want,
globalização da
globalization of the
liberdade
workers'
sindical?
rights. Where's the
Cadê o
globalization
respeito
for
à
freedom to
decisão da
choose
OIT?
to organize the workers? Where are the
Meus
ILO, the
companheiros,
International Labor
eu vou
Organization
terminar dizendo
standards.
pra vocês,
So with that, I end, my
muito
dear
obrigado.
brothers and sisters. Thank you
Valeu a
very
pena
much.
ter
It was
vindo
really
aqui.
worthwhile
Valeu
to
a
come
pena,
here. It was really
porque
worthwhile
eu
because
quero que vocês saibam
I want you all to
que eu fui
know
presidente.
that I was the president.
E o que me fez acertar
And what
é que
made
eu
me do the
sabia
right
quem
thing
eu
is that
era
I knew who I
antes de
was
ser presidente.
and who I was before I was president, where I came from before
pra
being
onde eu ia
president, and I know
votar
where I was
quando eu
going
deixasse a
back when I
presidência.
left the presidency of
Por isso,
Brazil.
muito
With that,
obrigado
thank you very
e até
much,
outro dia,
and I
se
hope
Deus
to see
quiser.
you soon again.
Parabéns,
Once
Bob.
again, congratulations, Bob.